we were in the section that characterized the journeys. There are 42 place stops along the way. 42 is an important number. There is a 42 letter name of God, but also to make 1 million separations. It is the answer to the question about the universe and everything. When in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Yes.
that question was posed to a fantastic supercomputer by a race of mice that are the most intelligent creatures in the universe. And they put it to it, and it, I think, took millions of years for this computer to work on it. It finally came to the answer to everything in the universe, etc. And the answer was 42. So 42 is clearly an important number, and it is the number of steps in this trip. And last time we were just looking it over, giving it a first look, and noticed some of the extra the extra details. Besides just mentioning the trips, there's some background detail, really dramatic background detail in chapter 33, verse 4, where it's talking about the Jewish people leaving while the Egyptians are burying their firstborn. That's a really powerful dichotomy. And then it talked about in verse 9 that there were 12 streams of water at this place called Elima, and 70 date palms were there for some reason. They mentioned that. And then it was mentioned that in verse 14, they went to Rephidim, but there wasn't water. And then they traveled, the next time it mentions extra information. And then in verse 38, talks about the death of Aaron in Hor Hahar, the death of Aaron, which happened in the 40th year. So it happened in the 40th year from Bnei Israel leaving Egypt, in the 5th month. So Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. So he dies on the first day of Av, according to the Torah. That might be the only time we have a yortzeit mentioned. Do you think so? That might be the only time where you actually have a date for a death. We know that we have a tradition that Moshe was born and died on the 7th of Adar. So we have to see at some point if it does specifically mention that, or if we just figured out indirectly. But Aaron, it directly tells us what day he died. Anyways, and then it has this thing about the Canaanite king of Arad, which is in the Negev of Canaan, he heard that Aaron died. sounds like. And then, so that's extra information. And then that's it. So you could say that some of this, like the streams and the fact in Elim and the fact that at Rephidim there wasn't water, so it's letting people know,
Right.
where, as long as they've traveled it, if you're ever traveling in this direction, you should know there's streams in Elim,
But not
there's
in-
no water in Rephidim. So you got to prepare for that. You could say that's like one of those travel ticks.
travel logs.
Yeah. But then the background information about the Egyptians burying their dead, and about the death of Aaron and the king of Arad hearing about it, that would have no benefit to future travelers. For some reason, that's included here. And again, you could say, just like they do in the beginning of Devarim, I think Lois was suggesting this last week, at the beginning of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, when Moshe is starting to give those final speeches that make up the book of Devarim, he makes cryptic reference to certain places, and we're told by the Medrash, Rashi quotes this, that these places, the names of these places hint to events that occurred, and this is veiled rebuke of the people. It's not going to be overt rebuke, but by mentioning the names and the places, you know what happened there, kind of thing. So if that's the case there, it's possible that that's happening here. Certainly there's certain name places like Kivro Tataiva, where they're buried for their desire, which is in verse 17. That's, we're told, is the place where they asked for meat. That's the point where they asked for meat. And there are some other names that you could easily feel, like Rephidim, the Medrash says, Rafu Yedehem min Torah. It's called Rephidim because they loosened their grip. That's where Amalek attacks, which is around 13 and 14 when they left. That's when Amalek attacks. And then, so some of these could be veiled indications of things that went on. And then I pointed out just geographically that at verse 35, that's when they get to Eilat, or near Eilat. That's the town of Etzion Gaver. That happens to be the name of the street that my son Shauli has lived on for the past 10 years in Ramat Eshkol. I know it well, Etzion Gaver, number one. And Sippy and I have stayed in that building for Pesach on 3 different occasions, on different apartments. So that would be the end of the zigzagging through the Sinai. What we think of as the Sinai, northern Egypt. Right. So, but until verse 35, all the stuff before is happening, what you would underneath the state of Israel, the present day state of Israel, underneath, either in the Negev or in the Sinai or in one of those areas that we would think of as northern Egypt. They're having like a kind of a zigzag crossing through. Once they get to here on 35, it's now going to, right, now it's going to be a straight line up, essentially a straight line up to where they end up on the other side of the Jordan, in the land of what used to be Moab, what's called the plains of Moab, next to the Jordan, across from Jericho. So it's pretty much a straight line up. Last week we were talking about what's called the King's Highway. So on the other side of the Jordan, on the other side of the mountain range, there's, it's to the east of the high mountains on the other side of the Jordan, there is this highway, which is called the King's Highway. And we talked about it last time, that you can travel along this highway. This is a known highway. It's been around for many thousands of years. It's how people, caravans, would travel when they're going from Africa and they want to go up to the area of Babylonia, Mesopotamia, Assyria. If they want to go up to that area, which is all like on the Euphrates and the Tigris, so and you'd go up there, and then you have a choice. You can go east to the lands of the east, or you can go continue northwest and go to Turkey, Syria, and Turkey, and to the Mediterranean. So, yeah, there is a blessing. Like if you look at the list of blessings, these blessings are mentioned in the Code of Jewish Law. I wonder if these are included in some Sidurim, in some prayer books. They have a section of special blessings. Usually after Shachris, somewhere over there, they usually have Birkat Hamazon, and then they have like a list of other blessings you might recite. They have weddings, Sheva Brachas, Bris Milah, and then you have this list of blessings. Do you have it? I'm a big talker, talking all about this list of blessings. And then, oh, here we go.
I think it's time to go. Yeah, I got it. Everyone's going to take a full start here. We're going to share, we'll take it back. There.
So these are like, they're called like Thanksgiving blessings. When you see lightning, when you hear thunder, when you see a rainbow, if you experience an earthquake or see a comet or see lofty mountains and very large rivers, which would be like the Mississippi, when you cross the Mississippi, which I've done on quite a few different places. I've done it by Dubuque. I've done it, by Galena, like when you're near Galena and you go over like to Dubuque. I've crossed it by St. Louis, untold amount of times. I've crossed it in the up north, like near Minnesota. Anyways, upon seeing oceans, upon seeing exceptionally beautiful people, upon seeing strange looking people or animals, seeing trees in full bloom, outstanding Torah scholars, outstanding secular scholars, upon seeing a king, if you see more than 600,000 Jews together, if you've seen a friend after they've recovered from life-threatening illness, you see a destroyed synagogue, on seeing a place where you had experienced a miracle, upon seeing a place where your parents or teachers see a miracle, and then there is upon seeing a place where, and this might also be the same blessing, it's where you make a blessing upon seeing a place where miracles were done for the Jewish people when on their away from Egypt, going to on their original trip. So it seemed like this did not have it. It just has, it says, upon seeing a place where one's parents, forebears, Torah teacher, or nation as a whole was miraculously saved from imminent danger. And this might be the same bracha, but the one in the Shulchan Aruch, the other day, Rabbi Fox from Darchei Noam, when he's doing his morning halacha after prayers, mentioned the one I'm talking about, which is if you saw a place where the Jewish people as a nation experienced miracles on their trek from from Egypt to Israel. So it sounded like they knew where some of these places were. And certainly if we wanted to travel that trek, if travel was completely open to Jews and was considered safe, you could, I'm sure there would be tours, because there are certain places that it's just clear to us that this is what the Torah was talking about, that in that place. And that road, that what's called the King's Highway, would have been, for a big chunk of the trip, at least half their time is on that other side over there. Just Kadesh alone, I think Rashi says somewhere they were there for 19 years. So that just Kadesh alone would be one of those, which is on that other side, would have taken up 20 of those years. He says it here,
Yeah.
that they were in Kadesh.
This campsite for 19 years.
Okay, so this is where Rashi says it. Okay. All right. Anyways, so that's our stuff from then. There is a place that they identify, which is where that the Arabs identify as where Hor Hahar is, and there apparently is some kind of a mosque there, and there are Hasidic Jews who have traveled there. They dressed up as Arabs, in Arab garb, and they travel there so that they can say Tehillim by where Aaron died. And it's along that King's Highway. They have a place that they think is where he died. And again,
Where they think Mount Hor is.
right. So Mount Horeb. So that, again, there is a mountain in northwest Saudi Arabia that's called Jebel Musa, which is like Moses's mountain. And there's also Petra, which is called Petra, the rock. And apparently the reason it's called the rock is because they have a tradition, that's where the rock was that Moshe struck. It would appear from our triptych here that that would have happened on the other side. It would not have happened when they were near Petra, but rather it would have happened I'm assuming where it says, well, Mara is not that one. Mara is a place where they had bitter water. That's in verse 8. So where do we think? Oh, here, verse 14. They went from Alush, they went to Rephidim, and there was no water there for them to drink. This is the first place where there was no water, according to the Rambam. This is not the place where he struck the rock. The place where he struck the rock would be, I think it was called Masa Mariba. Yeah, it's one of these places. I'm just passing it up. I'm sure I'm just missing it. Kibbutz Ataiva, that was the meat. It was called Masa Mariva, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyways, the water, I think the water happened before that. While there's before they're there, but I can't prove that right now. Somewhere there's Masa Mariva.
Yeah, there was water.
They brought up the water thing, but that water one was earlier when they complained about water and Moshe got water from the rock. That one was not a problem. That was the first time. This was the second time, right after Miriam died.
Yeah,
And then yeah, so wherever that is.
was the first water here is after that.
Right. All right. Anyways, so that's our travels. And now we are on verse 50. So this is 33:50. And Liz, do you want to give us a read?
Sure. Hashem spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, and you shall destroy all their prostration stones, all their molten images shall you destroy, and all their high places shall you demolish. You shall possess the land, and you shall settle in it. For to you have I given the land, to possess it. You shall give the land as an inheritance by lot to your families. To the many you shall increase its inheritance, and to the few shall you decrease its inheritance. Wherever its lot shall fall, his shall it be, according to the tribes of your fathers shall you inherit. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, those of them whom you leave shall be pins in your eyes and a surrounding barrier of thorns in your sides, and they will harass you upon the land in which you dwell. And it shall be that what I had meant to do to them, I shall do to you."
Okay, so this section here, it seems like there are two main charges. One charge is to remove any vestige of idolatrous practice from the land. And the second one is to remove all the people from those nations from the land. And we'll add a third. The third one is that the land shall be divided up, and a subsection of dividing it up is that it shall be done by lottery, but also with attention to population. Somehow this is gonna have to work out that the portions that are given to the people are both lottery, but also with an eye on how big the tribe is.
Right.
So just going to the Holy Bible in its silver case. I actually switched. I put a Koran Bible in here. It had like some other one, but I put a Koran one in here. So I like those Koran ones. Okay, so at the towards the end of the book of Joshua. So the last several chapters of the book of Joshua talk about the divvying up of the land and how they did it. Okay, so first of all, this is in chapter 19, verse 40 of Joshua, of the book of Joshua. So I'm going to read it in the English. The seventh lot came out for the tribe of the children of Dan according to their families. And the border of their inheritance was Tzorah and Eshtaol and Ir Shemesh and Shalabin. There's by the way, there's a Va'ayalon V'yitla. That Shalabin, I'm pretty sure, is what Sha'alavim, the kibbutz and the yeshiva, are named after, because they're right next to Ayalon and Yitla. And anyways, and Elon and Timnah and Ekron and Yehud and Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak. You think Bnei Brak is a modern Nope. Bnei Brak, Gat Ramon, Meyarkon, Rakon, and with the border before Yaffo. Okay, Yaffo is an ancient
And it's
city
still in the same
and a port
place.
in the same place. So this area is essentially what we call Tel Aviv of today. Tel Aviv of today. And that area is still identified when it comes to traffic reports and topography as Gush Dan, the portion of Dan, even to this day. And the name of the public bus service is Dan. And the name of hotels from there are the Dan hotels.
Right.
And this is all because of that this was the area of Dan. However, and the border of the children of Dan came out too little for them. Therefore, the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem and took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and possessed it, and dwelt in it, and called Leshem Dan, after the name Dan, their father. This, I think many people assume, is what we call Dan, Tel Dan, the hill of Dan, which is near the Banyas, which is in the north, in the Galilee, in that area, which is the mouth of the Jordan River. So that's called, there is a place there, an ancient archaeological hill, which is called Tel Dan, the Mount of Dan. So from this, it sounds like that became the area of Dan, because Dan themselves had run out of space. They didn't have enough space for all their people. This is not on the border of their land. This is a completely different land. It sounds like they had to go to an area that originally would not have been part of Israel, because otherwise, why are they conquering the people of there? The people should have already been conquered by the entirety of the Jewish people. Why are the tribe of Dan having to go and fight them? It must be that this part was not considered part of what was originally supposed to be given to Israel. There is one other option. And the other option is that this is an area where they were supposed to remove all the peoples, but did not.
Didn't.
So this is going to deal with both these issues. So first of all, you have Dan sort of going up on their own to take other land, which it doesn't exactly sound like that's the way it was supposed. It had to be. You would think it should have been everybody doing it, but maybe it's just because they were tough enough to do it anyways. They were able to do it.
The lot, and then they go from the lot to the size.
Right, but here it said both of them are right. But here in our Torah portion, it sounds like both are to be considered in the allotment.
Right.
So the allotment, it should not have stopped. If there are too many people for this allotment, then it should have been the national body that's in charge of divvying up land.
Yeah.
Should have had the responsibility to find them more land, that they should adjust accordingly. Whereas it sounds like this became the private matter of the tribe of Dan. So that is that. And then at some point, there's some issues with the various land, different people, and that's going to go into the book of Judges too. There's within the tribes, there's a divvying up land according to families, and some people got land they were thrilled with, and some people didn't. It talks about where the Levites went to, and the children of Israel. This is in chapter 21, verse 8. And the children of Israel gave by lot to the Levites these cities with their pasture lands, as the Lord gave command to the hand of Moshe. And they talk about each place, each one of these tribes had to give, some of their land for the cities for the Levites, and then also for the cities of refuge. And this is chapter 22, verse 41. And the Lord gave to Israel all the land which he swore to give to their fathers, and they possessed it, and they dwelt in it. That is one of the most important verses in Tanakh. This is from my museum of things you would expect to find in the Torah, but do not. This is a key verse from the book of Joshua, chapter 22, verse 41, when it says, and the Lord gave to Israel all the land which he swore to give to their fathers, and they possessed it and dwelt in it. And then I guess the rest of that chapter, and the Lord gave them rest round about according to all that he swore to their fathers, and there stood not a man of all their enemies before them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. Nothing failed of all the good things which the Lord had spoken to the house of Israel, all came to pass. So this was the fulfillment of the promise. In my museum, I think you'll remember from your various visits to my museum, that in my museum, one of our exhibits is how come the Torah does not include the fulfillment of the promise to the patriarchs?
I think I've been to that exhibit.
Right. This you would expect to find, since from the Torah portion of Lech Lecha, this has been the trajectory of the story. God tells Abraham that he's going to give this land to his offspring. He's going to be the father of a great nation in this land. And everything else is moving in this direction, especially we in our section of Bamidbar are all moving in this direction. And then it just stops. And they never get there. And here is the part. This is the part, that missing piece. So chapter 22. So the answer is, where is it? It's in the book of Joshua. That is the fulfillment of the promise. But this is no small thing. This is where everything was going. This is a huge, huge moment when they finally get that. But it happens in the book of Joshua, not in the 5 books of the Torah. The technical answer is because Moshe died before it happened. But honestly, that doesn't feel enough to leave out that part. that,
Yeah.
of what we call the 5 books. But it is, the reason, but why, anyway, so that's where it says it. God did fulfill it at this point. He fulfilled the promise that he made to us. All right. Anyways, then he lets the 2.5 tribes go back. And they go back, and then there's some issues with them and stuff. And then in chapter 23, and it came to pass, as all in the book of Joshua, a long time after the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their enemies around about, that Yeshua became old and stricken in his days. Yeshua called for all of Israel, and he gives his final talk to them. And he says, behold, I have allotted to you these nations that remain to be an inheritance for your tribes, from the Jordan, with all the nations that I have cut off, even to the great sea westward. The Lord your God, he shall expel them from you and drive them from out of your sight, and you shall possess their land as the Lord your God had promised you. Be therefore very courageous to keep to all that was written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, turn not aside from it, etc. And part of this is quoted in the Haggadah. This is that part where it goes, and Yoshua gathered all tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for the judges and for their officers. They presented themselves before God, and Yoshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord God of Israel, your fathers dwelt on the other side of the river in old time, Terach, the father of Abram. So this is all in the Haggadah. Actually 2 speeches, that earlier one and this speech. And then he says, you went over the Yarden, you came to Yericho, the men of Yericho fought against you, the Amori, the Perizi, the Kanani, the Chiti, the Girgashi, the Chivi, and the Yebusi. I delivered them into your hand. I sent the hornet before you. Actually, the Girgashi, that's interesting, because we said the Girgashi weren't there. Anyways, which drove them out from before you, the 2 kings of the Amorites. Now therefore fear God and sincerity. The people answered the Lord God. Yeshua said to the people, you cannot serve the Lord. He's a jealous God. We are witnesses. Part I'm looking for. There's one part where it makes it clear that they did not, in fact, conquer all the areas that they were supposed to conquer. I thought it was here. And I'm wrong. But it makes it clear that they were supposed to do this thing, which is get rid of all the people.
Right, yeah.
And they did not. There were pockets where there were people. And that was where does it say it? And that's the thing which you could say, did Dan, when the tribe of Dan, when Dan goes to that area and they have to do battle with people living in that area, were these people supposed to have been rid of? Were we supposed to be rid of them before and just didn't do it? Or is this new territory that wasn't originally designed to be in Israel? The thing is, if it's new territory that wasn't designed to be in Israel, why wouldn't you have it in Israel if it's the mouth of the Jordan River? Wouldn't you want to have control over the mouth of a river?
Yeah, of course.
Right. So it's just funny if that wasn't intended originally to be part of biblical Israel. If it was intended to be part of biblical Israel, why are there people there that are not from the tribes? So this could be a possible answer, which is they did not. Also, we know about the Jebusites, the Yevusi. It's not until King David conquers that area where Jerusalem is that the Jebusites are kicked out. So there are peoples scattered throughout Israel that,
And part of the explanation for 56,
yeah,
it says, God declares that the Jews must rid the land of the corrosive Canaanite presence. And if they fail to do so, they will suffer the fate God has intended to impose upon the Canaanites and be driven out. Only in the perspective of God's wisdom can this passage be understood. No human ruler has the right to decree that an entire population is to be exterminated or exiled. But God revealed that the Canaanite presence was incompatible with both the land's holiness and Israel's mission on earth. History is the most conclusive proof of this, for the fact was that the Jews could not bring themselves to eliminate all the Canaanites, with the result that the Jews were drawn to idolatry and debauchery and were in turn periodically oppressed and finally exiled.
now does it have any reference to
In the middle there, it said Rashbam someplace.
the Rashbam? I know it's in here somewhere. Somewhere it says that they did not
They should
conquer.
kill their enemies.
They left
Okay.
some of the place. Let's see here. Yeah. So anyways, somewhere it points out that they did not in fact do this, and they're gonna feel a bite of it. But I don't know if they did the first part, which is to wipe out any vestige of idol worship, which would be the idols themselves or the altars for those idols. When I had that lunch with the Imam Abdul and Tepli, I had a lunch with him at Shalit's one time, and I just spent the entire time. It was like 2 hours. I spent the entire time just asking him question one after another, because when am I going to get another chance to schmooze with an imam? And not just an imam, but he was an imam devoted to working with Jews. He was involved with the Hartman Institute. They had a program for imams where they were trying to organize imams which were open to relationships with Jews in Israel, and hope that they in turn would influence other Muslims around the world. So he was, I think, one of the leaders of this project, this Abdullah and Tepli. At the time, he was like the equivalent of a Hillel director, a Muslim director on Duke's campus. He might still be there, I don't know. Anyway, so I asked him if I mentioned that I had seen images of the Taliban destroying these giant carvings of the Buddha that were on the side of a mountain somewhere. And they were doing it because of idolatry. They were destroying vestiges of idolatry. So I mentioned to him, I said, when I watch something like that, on the one hand, I feel like if the Taliban are doing it, then it must be wrong. But then there's a part of me that recognizes that the Torah says you're supposed to destroy these idols and vestiges of idolatry. Now, the Torah only commands it for the land of Israel, but still within the land of Israel. So I asked him, is there ever a part of him that sees some of the stuff that they do and says, yeah, well, they're, good for them kind of thing. So he said that although Muhammad did destroy idols when he went to places, after Muhammad, they really didn't do it anymore. And he said one of the differences between Muslims and Jews is that Muslims, once there's much of the world they where they took control and then they just kept it. So he said we've been in continuous control of some of these areas since the 600s. So we have a lot of tradition with regard to these things. And he said that after Muhammad, they left after that for some reason. They didn't do that anymore. So some of these carvings and idols and things like that have been around since 600. So it became a tradition that you don't destroy them, or you don't need to destroy them, he said, by the fact that you see they didn't over all this time, and they had control over
Become artwork.
or something, which I thought was interesting. But we have a commandment to destroy them. So if we would find them in the land of Israel, you have a thing to destroy them. Mayor Kahana, I remember him every once in a while claiming that Israel should destroy the churches that are in Israel. Like the Russian compound, especially, which is right near the old city. But he felt like, and within the old city, there's all these churches. It's a command from the Torah to destroy them. And he would quote from the Torah, like here and in other places, that when you get there, you're going to destroy their idols. And then he would be called a racist and genocidalist.
Yep.
And then he would answer, and then he'd shout back, there'd be shouting, and he'd shout back, "Are you calling the Torah racist?" Like there'd be stuff going back and forth. But again, according to those who maintain that Christianity is idolatry, and and especially things like the iconography, the crosses, but also the icons, that there are people who argue that they are idolatry. And if they're idolatry, it would fall under this command to destroy them in the land of Israel. That's what he was asking for.
I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
He did not endear himself to it.
No, I don't think it was his goal. Remember, he used to daven at this. He lived in a neighborhood right near where I went to yeshiva for a couple of years, and we had dorms there. And my brother went to yeshiva at a different yeshiva on that same street. And so even before our yeshiva moved there, I used to visit my brother's yeshiva a lot. And if you're there for Shabbos, my brother would daven at this place, and Mayor Kahana would always daven there. And I used to just watch him sometimes, because on the one hand, he's just a guy.
Right.
That's what he looked like, just a guy. On the other hand, he was this lightning rod and, larger than life figure. Was weird.
A day, and I can't remember it.
Yeah. I had lots of friends who admired him, and some friends who were sort of followers of his. And they always remained my friends, amongst my closest friends, but we argued all the time.
That's the thing about friends. You should be able to argue.
Yeah, 100%. But on that issue, we argued all the time. Okay.
Zealot. That's what he was.
Yeah. All right. So.
Gotta go, guys.
All right.
Nice.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Okay.
From the river to the sea, obviously. Okay.
Oh, of course. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.
Yes, 100%. Okay, I think we'll just stop here. We'll pause here, and then we'll move on for a description. Starting with 34, we're going to have a description of the boundaries. Okay. Yeah. All right.
That works.
Okay, all right, be well, Estelle.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.